Nacido en Canadá, Royce Vavrek es uno de los libretistas y escritores más famosos del panorama operístico contemporáneo. Su obra se distingue por la potencia poética de sus textos y su capacidad para conectar la ópera con las sensibilidades del siglo XXI. Ha colaborado con compositores fundamentales de la escena actual como Du Yun, Missy Mazzoli, David T. Little, Paola Prestini y Ricky Ian Gordon, con quienes ha creado títulos que han marcado una nueva etapa para el género. Su ópera, Angel's Bone, fue reconocida con el Premio Pulitzer de Música 2017, consolidando su prestigio internacional, llamado por el New Yorker el Hofmannsthal del indie y por The Washington Post el metastasio de la ópera contemporánea. Vavrek ha desarrollado un lenguaje lírico profundamente cinematográfico, donde la emoción, la palabra y la imagen dialogan como en un poema visual. Entre sus obras destacan Breaking the Waves, Dog Days, 27 y JFK. Además de su trabajo como libretista, dirige la compañía Against the Grain Theatre en Toronto, desde donde impulsa proyectos experimentales que expanden los límites de la ópera como arte vivo. Hoy, en Pensadores Contemporáneos, Royce Vavrek nos invita a pensar la ópera como un espacio de resistencia, imaginación y diálogo entre la palabra y el sonido.
Buenos días, pues es un honor para mí estar aquí y quiero preguntarte una de las cosas de tu recorrido, cómo empezaste músico y tu recorrido al teatro y finalmente a ser libretista de ópera.
So I grew up in a small farming community in northern Alberta. And my parents, I was very lucky because even though my parents were people of the land, farmers, they really valued music. And so all of us kids were I have a brother and a sister, were sort of forced into taking piano lessons at the age of 5. And the rule is that you had to continue with piano until you chose another instrument. And so my brother called their bluff and decided that he wanted to be a percussionist. And they refused to have that noise in the house, I think. But he then went off into motorbikes and stuff like that, whereas I found my way into singing and the community theater. So I was doing plays and musicals, often with my father, who also loved doing that. So I was just so lucky to come from a family that valued the arts in big ways. But I left home at 18 years old to study at Concordia University in Montreal, where I did my undergraduate degree in 2 majors. One was filmmaking, and the other was creative writing. And so I was just sort of sharpening my tools as a storyteller and trying to find all the different ways that I could tell stories. I took a sculpture class that was very formative, just thinking about objects and in a 3-dimensional art form as opposed to filmmaking at the time, which was is a 2-dimensional form. And so I thought I was going to be a filmmaker. Then I went to my master's program in NYU, which was in musical theater writing. So I have trained in writing Broadway musicals. And then immediately after that, I entered the American Lyric Theater Composer Librettist Development Program. And it was there that I met my first group of collaborators. It was there that I got the initial mentorship that I needed to be a librettist and to be a professional in this world. I'm very indebted to ALT, it's called. And then it was shortly after I did the ALT program that I was involved in a commission at Carnegie Hall through the Don Upshaw Osvaldo Goliov Young Composers Showcase. And so this man, David T. Little, had a commission there, and he reached out to me. He had seen a small excerpts that I had done at ALT, and he asked me if I would want to write something with him for Carnegie Hall. And I said, absolutely. So we did that, and as fate would have it, Missy Mazzoli came to that event and asked me to come and see the beginnings of an opera she was writing that I would then come on and help her finish. So it was just sort of like one opportunity led to another, but those formative years, those early years, were really sort of jam-packed with learning and just creating. It was also at that time that I was working, sort of after grad school, I worked for 3 years at the Public Theater in New York. And so I initially started as an intern under Oscar Eustis, who is still the artistic director there and who is a genius. But then I moved into the musical theater I moved into the musical theater development office. And it was there that I saw like 400 shows in my first couple years. And I was really just trying to take in as much theater as humanly possible and developing it through that office. But it was all other people's projects. I didn't do any of my own. So it was also really important for me to sort of be involved in the genesis of other projects that I was not artistically involved in. But then after my tenure at the Public Theater, I moved into a freelance opera career. And basically, I'd say 90% of my life is writing opera. And then 10%, well, let's say 80%, and then 10% is concert works, oratorios, things like that, and then 10% is other events and things like that I have to figure out time and make space in my schedule for. But it's really, I found opera and it won't let me go.
Sí. Y haciendo este recorrido de vida, ¿qué tiene la ópera, el libreto de ópera, que has dejado todo al lado para ir a hacer tanto? Y sí, ¿qué tiene la ópera, el libreto? Porque tengo yo una respuesta personal, pero que de todo este trayecto, teatro, la música, el canto, a ser libretista de ópera.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I've left anything behind. I would really love to find a way to work in cinema and to marry opera and cinema in bigger ways than just adapting cinema to opera. I'd love to write projects that are intended to be filmed as opposed to their intention to be on the stage, for instance. And yeah, but opera, I think that when I was studying musical theater, it became apparent that the ideas that excited me, and especially when I was a young boy, watching these really provocative movies. Like I was 14 years old when I saw Breaking the Waves for the first time, and it changed my life. And so opera just became more and more apparent as a canvas that would support the big idea projects that I was looking to create. But musical theater also is a canvas for big ideas, and I would love to contribute more musical theater rep, more commercial musical rep. And I would love to find weird art projects where I'm working with major painters and finding ways to write words and have sonic worlds that are built around people who do not work in opera, who work in very different artistic mediums. I think that we're living in a time when interdisciplinary work is so beautiful and awesome, and I really want to just be involved in that conversation. And so whether it's opera, which yes, it does seem like it is the primary focus of my work, but it's not the only thing that I'm interested in, and I'm curious about so many things. I cannot paint, so I will definitely leave that to the amazing painters, but I would love to find ways to just be, to collaborate with people from many different disciplines and learn what it is that fires them up about telling stories through different mediums.
¿Y cuál ha sido, me parece que también una figura fundamental con la que uno trabaja es el compositor, que no tenemos este trabajo de casa solitario, sino trabajas con un compositor. Y me parece que es una de las cosas más bellas que hay.
Yes, and I think that I love working with a lot of people, and I love having a teammate and a composer and often a librettist or a dramaturg, all of these people coming together, but I also really value the solo reflecting time and being alone with my imagination at my computer. So yeah, it is a very solitary profession at times, but I'm okay with that. I like to have time by myself, but I'm a very social animal. So I love being with people, but I also, I think it was Sondheim who once said that interruption is the antithesis of creating art, And so I think that there is something about being alone and that uninterrupted time where you sink into the colors of your imagination is so important for every creative, whether you work entirely solitarily or if you work solitary in some instances and then have to come to a bigger group to share your ideas. But I love collaboration. I love marrying my ideas and my voice to other people's and to make space for other people in my creative life. I really, really value that.
Y sobre esta obra que vamos a ver esta noche, Rompiendo las Horas, ¿qué podemos esperar como público que conocemos el original, la película, que es brutal y que me parece que es muy operística?
Yeah, well, I have not seen this production yet, so I cannot wait to experience it like everybody else. But I think that what you can expect to find in any of the operas that I've written is a highly theatrical experience. I think I've borrowed that from my experience in the theater, in musical theater especially, my training. I think that there's just an inherent motor, like a dramatic motor that
Yes.
really pushes our operas, our collective operas. I think that you can expect a very virtuosic, emotional journey with Bess. It really is her journey in every way. And I think that if you come with an open heart and really empathize with her, hopefully you will have a transcendent experience. And even though it is a harrowing journey, it is a very powerful and a very meaningful one that I think that you can leave feeling really, your soul feels full.
Claro, y me parece que en particular esta película de Rompiendo las Horas tiene muchos elementos que componen una gran ópera. ¿Qué piensas que cualquier tema puede llevarse a la ópera?
I have a hard time going to the cinema and not sort of in the back of my mind think about how I would approach it if I was to adapt it for the stage. So in some ways, I think that, of course, there's a way for anything to be adapted. You could set the phone book and claim it's an opera, and if you find a director who is excited by that, then I'm sure something beautiful could come out of that. But yeah, there are things that I would not have thought would make massive splashes in the opera and the musical theater world. Like, who would have thought that Hamilton would have been the cultural, seismic thing that it has become? But I think that it's those projects that seem unproducible or unadaptable or like a hip hop musical about a historical American figure, or here's an opera about a woman in the 70s who lives in Skye, who is dealing with a paralyzed husband. I don't know that people go to the cinema and say, oh, well, that should be an opera. But I did, and I do. I find that those are, I really love the movies that have big ideas. And I think that those are the ones that translate the most easily in my imagination. But I would never say that anything is not adaptable. I think that that's kind of a silly notion. If there's a will, there's a way. But these operas do take 4 years, 5 years. Sometimes they take much longer. I think the quickest opera I've ever written has been about 15 months, from libretto being written to the composer, to us presenting it to the staging. And so whatever you do, whether it's an adaptation of a movie or a novel or an original story, you have to be ready to commit to many, many years of your life writing this piece. And then we wrote this starting in 2013, 14, and I'm sitting with you talking about it in 2025. And that's a really crazy thing. So even after we've premiered these works, we are the custodians of them, and so they become part of our legacy. And while I don't have any plans on writing an autobiography, I do think that if you take all of my work and put it together and analyze it, I think that I hope that would make the most complete picture of who I am.
Wow. Para ti, ¿cuál sería la diferencia entre el teatro musical y la ópera? Muchos alumnos me preguntan eso. Y aquí en México hay mucho interés en el teatro musical más que en la ópera.
Well, I think that the proof is in the pudding that in New York we have 30-some Broadway theaters that are, let's say half of them are home to musicals, and we have one or two opera companies. We have the Met and then some smaller companies, and so there's definitely a bigger audience for musical theater. And so I don't know, I think that the similarities are far more easier to identify, are far more easy to identify, but the differences are there. I think that some people really love the fact that a lot of grand opera and historical operas are unamplified. And so the idea of directly communicating without enhancement with a microphone is very important to their understanding of what opera is. I do not think that that is a primary tenet of what I think opera is or what opera should be, but that is a distinction that a lot of people make. It really is a lot about the classical voice, but I've written operas like Angel's Bone, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2017, with Du Yun, and it has a punk performer. There is an aria about 3/4 of the way through where a woman in a punk musical language sings a very aggressive assault opera. And so there's even room for that, for non-traditional classical vocalists. I run a company in Toronto called Against the Grain, and there, I want to tell stories through song, through the voice. I don't care if your language is jazz, or if it's classical, or if it's heavy metal. I think that it's exciting when those things blend and become something really cool and progressive, but I think that opera they're sung stories, often sung through, but sometimes not. And the biggest difference, I would say, is the venue. Operas are done in opera houses, and musicals are done in theaters. But even an opera house is a theater, so that's kind of a ridiculous sort of distinction to make. It's a tricky question, because people in the musical theater camp think that opera is this highbrow thing that doesn't connect to a contemporary audience. And people in the opera world think that musical theater is so silly and yeah, and so, but they're the same. When I write a musical, I approach writing the text almost exactly the same way that I do writing an opera libretto. And my operas are generally numbers operas, so we value song. We want to have recit that leads into big, meaty musical numbers, whether they're arias or duets or group numbers, but big song moments, which is similar to musical theater. But yeah, opera is often sung through, is a big distinction, but you can also find musicals like Rent that are sung through. So I think somebody smarter than I needs to tell us exactly what is different between opera and musicals, because I love the fact that we're blurring the lines. But opera houses tend to just do big operas with a capital O, and theaters, Broadway theaters, tend to do shows with a more musical theater or popular musical language. So that seems to be the biggest distinction.
Y después de tantos años de tener óperas, comisiones, ¿qué es lo que te mueve hoy? ¿Qué estás trabajando el día de hoy?
Great question. Well, I have two operas with Missy that we are completing. One is our first opera for the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And a really amazing statistic is that Missy will be the first woman to ever have a world premiere at the Metropolitan Opera. So we're breaking that glass ceiling, and we hope that it doesn't get rebuilt, because we need more female voices in everything, but in opera in particular. So there's that, which is based on a George Saunders novel called Lincoln in the Bardo, which won the Booker Prize many years ago. It's a beautiful piece about a father's grief and a group of ghosts that try to get his newly deceased son to understand that he's dead and transcend. And it's filled with all of Missy's gorgeous color. George Saunders, his book is just filled with these really cool, singular characters. And I cannot wait to present that in a year. But then we will, 2 months prior, premiere another grand opera at the Edinburgh International Festival, which is called The Galloping Cure. And it's an opera that is based on the Kafka short story, A Country Doctor, but told through a reimagined story by the Pulitzer Prize finalist, Karen Russell, who is just one of the more surreal, beautiful, wacky thinkers. I absolutely love the way that her mind works. And so it's a story that is inspired by the opioid epidemic, and is all about a weird devil character who comes to an industrial town with a carousel that alleviates people's pain.
Wow.
And people become addicted to riding this carousel. So there's that. And then with my company Against the Grain, we are doing a number of projects. I'm about to premiere a piece called Indians on Vacation, which is a really important work for me because it is, I am the only non-Indigenous person on the project. And I feel so lucky that my Indigenous colleagues have invited me into this opportunity and to create art with them. But I am so thrilled that I get to amplify their voices. And so we will bring that to Toronto in the spring. I'm working on a new opera with Du Yun, our first after Angel's Bone. I am working on a number of projects with Mikael Carlson. We just premiered at Christmas time Fanny and Alexander, which is an adaptation of Ingmar Bergman's masterpiece. So I'm very, very, very excited about that. Missy and I are thinking about a new project that we can't really announce, but that will be for 2029 or 30, which I'm very, very, very excited about. And then I also have new projects. I love digging into Canadian mythology and Canadian literary classics. So I'm working on a strange adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, which is the first story that I ever read as a kid, and I've wanted to do something with that. And then this beautiful seminal Canadian poem called The Cremation of Sam McGee, which I am sort of reimagining and creating something about that deals with men of industry in the Canadian North. And so, yeah, a lot of, those are some of the big ones. I'm excited to dig into an adaptation of Denis Arcand's famous film, Jesus of Montreal, which we're imagining as a dance opera. So that's something that my company will also be exploring. And then chasing these operas around the world. Oh, and I have a passion. I'm about to premiere a passion in Bregenz with my Icelandic collaborator, Daniel Bjarnason. And the assignment for that project was to write a passion that is secular. And so we are really eager to try to figure out a really profound, non-religious approach to a passion. So lots of stuff.
Sí, mucho. Y lo que me llama la atención es que tengas una compañía dedicada a la ópera. En México no existe eso, por ejemplo. Ya hay dificultad para grupos de teatro, compañías, pero no conozco ninguna compañía de ópera en México.
Yeah.
Sí, es un poco sorprendente que tengas una compañía de ópera, que trabajes tanto, tantas comisiones y pues da como una esperanza de algo que se puede hacer también aquí.
No, it's a very exciting time, I find in North America, and I hope that our operatic energy is going to trickle down into Mexico City, and that some young people will maybe take up the mantle and create a small chamber company. It's really hard to raise the money for anything these days, but it's a very worthwhile endeavor. So I'm hopeful that maybe some person will come to see Breaking the Waves tonight.
Claro.
And they'll say, oh my goodness, we should be doing this on a smaller scale. But Mexico, there is a drought that we need to, or there's a niche that we can fill. So I'm hopeful. I think that we all love music and we love storytelling, and opera is the major synthesis of those two. So I really hope that that Mexico, that this is the beginning of, and this is not just the beginning. There have been previous productions, but I hope that there will be just more volume so that people can see these new ideas and experience new musical voices.
Y sobre todo, una historia contemporánea como la que vamos a ver hoy, en esta historia trágica de esta mujer. ¿Cuál fue, si puedes no decirnos todo lo que va a pasar, pero qué partes de la película fueron las que te cambiaron la vida que nos decías antes?
I can tell you, as a 14-year-old boy who was growing up on a farm and was like beginning to understand my queer identity, the idea of a man who is paralyzed and who asks his wife to go and find other lovers as a means, as sort of like a sexual surrogate for him, it felt so wild. I could not believe that that kind of art was being made, and it felt so queer to me in a way. And so I will forever remember watching this little clip that was presented. It was nominated for Best Motion Picture Drama at the Golden Globe Awards. And so they had like, I don't know, 30-second clips of the movies. And I just caught this tiny little glimpse of Jan telling Bess to go and find other lovers. And I was just, I knew that it was an idea that I had to wrestle with, and I knew it was going to be a film that meant a lot to me. So I love that. I'm really proud of our opening aria. His name is Jan. There's something, it was the first piece of music that we wrote. We presented it in a concert at BAM back in 2013, I believe. And so it became sort of an initial identity for the opera. I love that. I love the "Your body is a map" moment, the aria that when Bess is exploring Jan's body and vice versa. Really, really proud of that moment. And the top of Act 3, where Bess reiterates a line where she sort of takes "your body as a map" and turns it into my body. And when we wrote this, it didn't have the extra resonance that it does now, where in America, we are dealing with women's bodily autonomy being taken from them, and abortion being an issue that we are discussing after decades of it being just accepted that is a right that women have. And so I'm always really struck by that moment now in the contemporary dialogue and how Bess saying, "It's my body." I think that's really, really important, and it always just kind of puts a dagger in my heart when she says that, knowing what we're dealing with in the United States.
Siento que pasó un tiempo importante de este primer momento para hacer una ópera años después sobre el tema. Y creo que tuviste realmente un acercamiento profundo a la psicología de la feminidad de esta mujer.
Yeah, I think that as a writer, you try to burrow yourself into characters regardless of gender and ideally race and all the things that make us different, because there's an amazing Maya Angelou quote that we are all much more similar than we are different, or I'm paraphrasing wildly. And that is very true. When I was in high school, I wrote 17 plays. And I would write them for my classmates, and we would take them to competitive play festivals. And most of my classmates were girls, because girls seem to be more excited about the theater. And so from 14, 15, I was either writing roles for myself or writing roles for my female friends. And so I loved that. I loved becoming a motor for a character that happened to be a woman, but they were just a character. And gender is important, of course, but it's also not. And so I think that I tried to burrow myself into Bess, not as necessarily a woman, but as a character that I felt a lot of compassion for and a lot of empathy for.
Pues estamos muy contentos de tenerte en México y quisiéramos tener mucho más contacto contigo y sobre todo para los jóvenes que van a venir esta noche a conocer tu trabajo? ¿Dónde se te puede localizar? ¿Tienes una página de tu grupo y todas esas coordenadas para seguir tu trabajo, que parece que pues es muy vasto y vienen muchos proyectos que queremos conocer?
Yes, yes, I have a webpage. It's just my name, roycevavrek.com. I also have my Instagram, and I also have a street photography account that is I love taking photographs. So that's another passion of mine. I kind of feel like it's my public diary of all the places and experiences that I've had. And especially for somebody who works in words, I love taking photographs and documenting my collaborators and my world. And so, yeah, find me on Instagram, find me at my webpage, roycevavrek.com. And yeah, I hope a lot of young people will come and understand that opera can be for them. I don't know what the statistics are and how many young people are, or how many people in the world. Like, is it 1% of the population has given opera a chance? Is it 5? I have a feeling it's more like 1. And I think that people are scared of opera.
Yeah.
And I also think that I saw the correlation in my relationship to dance and how I always felt like, oh, I could go to the ballet, but will I really understand the amazing feats that these dancers are doing? And the answer is yes. The answer is you don't need to know all the techniques. I love watching figure skating, and I don't understand really the technique of a triple Lutz, for instance. And so I think that we need to expose young people to opera in hopes that a handful of them will want to come back. And I think that there are people out there that just haven't considered giving opera a chance. And I really, really hope that we can get them into the theater, because some of them will not feel like it's for them. And like, I don't love lots of sports. I don't love watching golf on TV, but that's fine. There are many people who do love golf. And so I think that we just need to try to expose and see and offer what we're doing and show them that it's not just people wearing horns and singing these 5-hour shows. Our operas are generally significantly shorter than that.
Me gusta mucho lo que dices sobre la gente tiene miedo a la ópera, pero al escucharte estamos en otra canal y sabemos que no va a ser lo que esperamos de una ópera.
Well, and my operas often have curse words and really wild, strange storytelling that talks speaks in a very an aggressive vernacular that I think will connect with a younger audience in particular. Missy and I did an opera called The Listeners that we premiered in Norway, but then brought to Opera Philadelphia. They were two of the initial commissioners. And we did it in Philadelphia at the same time that the new intendant, Anthony Roth Costanzo, put in place a ticket policy where every ticket was $11. And it meant that we sold out the performances that we had, and it was audiences that had never been to an opera. Lots of audiences had never been to the opera. And we had the most amazing time because they would laugh and they would react in really, really vocal ways. And it felt like you were at a movie theater watching a movie where like you have that collective experience of people responding. And it felt so cool to see an opera where people felt like they could respond with laughs or sort of talking back to the stage or things like that. Whereas I think that opera is scary in that reverence, in that solemnity where you're there and you don't want to make a single noise and then you hear the rappers, the candy rappers and things like that, and all these things become so heightened because everybody is being so quiet. It was just such a beautiful way to experience an opera that I had written where people were so open to being vocally responsive to the action that they were seeing on stage.
Como escritor inmerso en tantos libretistas, dramaturgos, cineasta, ¿qué consejos les darías a los jóvenes que quieren iniciar tanto en la música, el teatro musical, la ópera y también, ¿por qué no?, el cine que tiene que ver con tu trabajo.
Just do it. It seems impossible to create an evening-length work from top to finish. It just feels like it will take forever and all these, but just do it. And also make sure there's nothing more intimidating than the blank page. And so I love to throw words onto the screen and then edit. And I think that that's something, as opposed to being precious about what you're doing, just throw some things on there. And then I promise you, it will feel like you've broken some ground and it will just be that much easier. But get into it. Understand whether or not you have that you respond to routine or not. I find that because my life is so erratic, I'm traveling all the time, I don't have 10 to 6 every day to write. And some people really hold that time sacred and will write from those hours and they will be productive. And some days they'll write for those 8 hours and they will be unhappy with what they've written and they'll just discard it, which is totally normal. But I find that I had to cultivate a routine in my own work that was sort of an anti-routine. I have to be able to do work at 9 p.m. in Mexico City if necessary. I can't just wait until 10 a.m. the next day. So I think that is something that has made my life a little bit easier, just out of the reality of what it means to get stuff done. Deadlines are great. Deadlines keep everything on track, and you know, deadlines also. If I've never met a composer who has necessarily met it, that's not true. I know a lot of composers who have met deadlines, but I think that they're good structural things. But I also think that if you need a couple extra minutes to write something, just there's always that time. But I think that the rigidity of deadlines is a very good thing. I think be true to your voice. I think that we're in a time now where our personal cultural perspectives are really valued, and lean into those. We are, in theory, prolonging the lives of stories, especially when we adapt them. And you are also doing that through original stories. If you write something original, you are saying that I value this story and want it to be something that is that exists longer. We come from oral traditions in general, where we love to tell stories. We're every day we are constantly telling people stories. And so just what is it that you have to say? But also, don't wait forever for something that you have to say. There are so many things that we can say. And so I think that jump in, don't expect every story to accomplish everything you need it to. Let each story compartmentalize to a certain extent. But then also remember that these shows take a long time. So you are going to be living with them for many, many, many years, and many years after they've premiered. So remember that you are going to be the agent of these things.
Es muy interesante lo que contabas como escritor, tener que haber salido de tu rutina, porque creo que es romper como estructuras mentales, tener que trabajar, y eso hace que la página en blanco desaparezca. Háblanos más de esto.
Well, I do love having uninterrupted swaths of time, but that's just not realistic at this time of my career. So just cultivating in myself an ability to write when necessary, like when needed, is really, really, really important. I think that it's also very important to be true to your own prism. I always say that whenever I collaborate with somebody, we're putting our prisms in front of a story. And so I want to know what it means for you to be telling that story. And at a time when we really do value cultural identity, and there's this huge conversation about who has the right to tell which stories. And so I think that I'm always, that's always at the back of my mind, that I want to be I want to be, what is the word I'm looking for? Respectful of the notion that there are people who should be telling stories, that I can allow them to do that, and I want to see what they come up with. And the other side of the coin is that I love telling a whole variety of stories. So how do you really know which stories are truly appropriate, which are appropriating ideas that you shouldn't take? But I think that really it comes down to this idea of what is in your heart that you need to say, and then making space for other people to tell the stories that maybe you shouldn't be saying. And as a leader, as an artistic leader now, really making space for those different perspectives is so, so, so important to me. And I'm very passionate about educating a new generation of Indigenous voices and giving them the tools to maybe contribute to this medium that I love. And so that has become a huge priority at my company in Toronto, Against the Grain, is the mentorship and the creating practical opportunities for people to learn. Because we can tell people what it means to write opera all day long, but until you actually do it, you don't really understand. And so because it is so expensive, those opportunities are not, they're not as common as they should be. And so I really, I value the education of a new generation of marginalized voices. And in Canada, it's the Indigenous population that we're really trying to uplift and give an artistic canvas to.
Pues de nuevo, muchas gracias por esta entrevista y creo que das una luz para la gente de México, sobre todo porque aquí hay mucho talento en cuanto a música. México es un país de 100% música, letra y eso, entonces creo que hoy tendremos una gran sorpresa. Gracias al programa Grandes Pensadores, gracias por estar aquí.